It is a Tuesday morning in the summer of 1924. Inside the U.S. Patent Office on Broadway, a line of inventors wait to file their claims. Men in boiler hats, engineers with rolled blueprints, and, at the end of the line, a woman. She wears a silk dress, white gloves, and a broad hat with a ribbon. Under her arm is a stack of diagrams and notes, hand-drawn in a neat, delicate script. The clerk glances up and smiles politely. "Ma'am, are you filing for someone?" The woman in line smiles back, calmly, confidently. "No," she says, "for myself." Beulah Louise Henry, inventor, entrepreneur, visionary. In a world that barely believed a woman could build a machine, she patented dozens. They called her Lady Edison. But behind that nickname was a story of imagination and determination that defied every expectation of her time. Welcome, I'm Tony Ray, and this is Historical Insights. Today, we step into the life of Beulah Louise Henry, one of America's most prolific female inventors. A woman who turned curiosity into a career, charm into strategy, and ideas into over 100 patents. This is the insight into the woman known as Lady Edison. Beulah Louise Henry was born in Raleigh, North Carolina in 1887, the heart of the post-Reconstruction South. Her family was prominent, their roots deep in Southern tradition. Her grandfather had served as a Confederate officer and later as a U.S. Senator. Her father was a lawyer and a businessman. It was a household of education and expectation. The women were to be refined, cultured, and polite, not inventors. But Beulah was different. As a child, she took apart her dolls to see how their arms worked, how their eyes blinked. She fashioned her own toys from spools and scraps of cloth, then drew diagrams of how she could improve them. Neighbors laughed. Her teachers were baffled. But her mother encouraged her curiosity, a rare blessing for a girl of her era. Beulah didn't see invention as engineering. She saw it as problem-solving. When her umbrella blew inside out during a storm, she imagined one with a double canopy that could withstand the wind. When her mother's sewing machine jammed, she drew a mechanism to keep the thread from tangling. She did not yet know it, but those drawings were the beginning of a career that would span half a century. Henry attended Elizabeth College in Charlotte, and later Greensboro College, studying art and literature, not mechanics or engineering. Formal training in science was rare for women, but Beulah didn't need a laboratory to think like an inventor. She saw engineering in every object around her, the way a hinge door moved, the sound of a spinning wheel, the rhythm of a typewriter. She once said, "I never planned to invent anything. The ideas just come to me because I cannot help it." Her friends called her the Idea Girl. By the early 1910s, America was changing. Electric lights, automobiles, and telephones were reshaping daily life. For young Beulah Henry, the age of invention was calling. She left the South for New York City, a move that would transform her life. There, she rented a small room and set to work, armed with only a notebook, a sketch pad, and a belief that her ideas mattered. In a city that barely believed women could vote, Beulah Louise Henry was about to prove that they could invent the future. When Beulah Louise Henry arrived in New York, she entered a world humming with invention. It was 1912, an age of motion and transformation. Factories buzzed, typewriters clattered, and the skyline rose higher each year. Men in crisp suits filed patents for everything from automobile parts to fountain pens. But a woman walking into the patent office alone, that still drew stares. Beulah didn't care. She wasn't there for permission. She was there to create. Her first invention was simple, but clever. A vacuum ice cream freezer. Instead of hand churning, Beulah's design used air pressure to speed up the freezing process. It made ice cream smoother, faster, and easier. In 1912, she filed her first patent. The device didn't revolutionize dessert making, but it marked a milestone. Beulah Louise Henry, inventor. And unlike many women who patented under their husbands' names, she filed entirely under her own. That same year, her name appeared in local papers. A Southern woman secures a new patent. One headline read, "No first name, just a woman." It was a start. Over the next few years, Henry refined her approach. She realized she didn't need to build every device herself. She could design them, draft their mechanics, and partner with model makers to construct prototypes. This collaboration became her secret weapon. She thought in ideas, not in metal. She rented workspace filled with notebooks, tools, and scraps of cloth, thread, and tin. Her walls were lined with sketches, her desk cluttered with tiny parts from sewing machines and toys. She wasn't a scientist in the traditional sense. She was a visionary problem solver, turning daily frustrations into practical solutions. In those early years, investors often dismissed her. Women weren't expected to innovate, let alone run a business. Manufacturers rejected her designs, claiming women's ideas didn't sell. But Beulah kept working. She paid for prototypes out of pocket. She knocked on doors herself. She wrote, rewrote, and refined every idea until it could no longer be ignored. Her persistence soon paid off. In 1917, she patented the Protograph, a typewriter attachment that made carbon copies without using carbon paper. It was faster, cleaner, and far less messy than the existing methods, quickly becoming a hit in busy corporate offices. The invention drew attention from office supply companies and newspapers alike. By the early 1920s, Beulah Louise Henry had become a sensation. Photographers adored her, poised, fashionable, confident. She represented a new kind of woman, modern, independent, inventive. The press began to call her Lady Edison, a nickname that was both flattering and faintly patronizing. They marveled that a woman could invent anything at all, but Henry didn't mind the nickname. She knew publicity mattered. Each article meant more people saw her designs, more investors took her seriously, and more young women saw what was possible. Beulah Louise Henry had arrived. But this was only the beginning. Her next wave of inventions would range from the practical to the whimsical. Toys, sewing machines, even umbrellas. Each one would carry her unmistakable stamp. Usefulness with imagination. By the mid-1920s, Beulah Henry was famous. Magazines featured her alongside the industrial titans of the day. Headlines called her the cleverest woman in America. But fame brought scrutiny. Reporters often wrote more about her appearance than her work, her dresses, her poise, her southern charm. They marveled that someone so delicate could make machines. It was praise wrapped in scorn. Yet, Beulah turned it to her advantage. She understood that public curiosity could open doors. She gave interviews, smiled for cameras, and used the attention to promote her inventions. The world might have called her Lady Edison, but she was also Madame Marketing. Beulah Louise Henry was changing what it meant to be an inventor. In an era when most people pictured inventors as old men in cluttered workshops, she redefined the image. She was modern, articulate, and strategic. Proof that invention could belong to anyone with imagination and persistence. By the 1930s, she held more than 25 patents, with dozens more pending. She established her own laboratory in New York, hiring mechanics and assistants to bring her ideas to life. And she licensed many of her patents to manufacturers, earning royalties and building an independent income rare for women of her time. In short, she had turned creativity into a career. Beulah Louise Henry had achieved what few women or men ever did. She was wealthy, respected, and known across the country as America's Lady Edison. But success brought new challenges. As she entered the 1930s, a changing world, the Great Depression, shifting markets, and new technologies would test her resilience like never before. And through it all, she would continue to do what she had always done: observe, imagine, and invent. As 1930 neared, Beulah Louise Henry was one of the most successful female inventors in America. Dozens of patents bore her name. Her creations filled department stores and toy shops. And yet, in the world of invention, she remained an anomaly. When she walked into boardrooms to pitch an idea, men often assumed she was a secretary. Once, upon presenting blueprints for a new sewing machine mechanism, an executive smiled and asked her to fetch him coffee. She simply waited for the coffee to arrive and then explained the complex differential gear system on his desk. In a field dominated by men in suits, Beulah wore silk. She disarmed with charm and then stunned her audience with ingenuity. Her persistence wasn't just admirable, it was revolutionary. Because, at that time, there were very few women filing patents at all, and fewer still making a living from them. Beulah Henry understood that invention was not only creativity, it was business. She licensed her designs to manufacturers, earning royalties instead of wages. She was one of the first inventors, male or female, to build a career on licensing rather than production. It gave her freedom. She could dream, design, and delegate the rest. Her inventions, from sewing machine attachments to practical household items, reached stores across the country. Each one bore the quiet brilliance of her mind: elegant, efficient, and useful. Then came the crash of 1929. The Great Depression swept across America, shutting factories, crushing businesses, and silencing countless inventors.
The country was dying by inches. It was dying because trade and commerce had declined to dangerously low levels.
But Beulah Louise Henry refused to stop. She continued to design, even as her manufacturers folded, even as sales dwindled. When investors vanished, she adapted. When companies said now isn't the time, she believed that there is always a time for a better idea. Creativity didn't slow, it accelerated. In 1934, she patented one of her most sophisticated mechanisms, a continuous feeding, visible writing typewriter. This was a major technical feat that allowed the typist to see the words as they were printed and reduce paper waste. It proved her mechanical skill was far beyond the domestic novelties the press often highlighted. She also filed new patents for toys, dolls, and novelty products. affordable items that brought joy to children during the dark times. Her toys became small comforts in a weary nation. In a world of scarcity, Beulah was still creating abundance. Even as her inventions succeeded, the press never stopped reminding readers that she was a woman inventor. Articles described her as dainty, well-dressed, or charming, before ever mentioning her work. They marveled at her femininity, as if intelligence and grace could not coexist. She used their fascination, though, as leverage, turning curiosity into coverage. If the public came for the novelty of Lady Edison, she made sure they stayed for her ideas. At the height of her career, Henry employed a small team of engineers and model makers. They built her designs under her direct supervision, a rare arrangement for any inventor, let alone a woman in the 1930s. She paid them fair wages, treated them as collaborators, and inspired loyalty. Her assistants described her as tireless, curious, and kind, a perfectionist who demanded precision but always thanked them by name. She was not only an inventor, she was a leader. By the late 1930s, America was recovering. Industry was shifting, and new technologies, plastics, electronics, radio, were emerging.
But today, we have reason to believe that things are a little better than they were 2 months ago. Industry has picked up, railroads are carrying more freight, farm prices are better.
Beulah adapted once again. She experimented with synthetic materials, lightweight designs, and new manufacturing techniques. Each decade brought change, and she met it with creativity. She never stopped learning, never stopped inventing. Henry had weathered the Depression and conquered skepticism, but she was more than the symbol of persistence. She was proof that innovation could thrive under any circumstance. As the 1940s dawned and the world prepared for war, Beulah's creative energy took new directions. Her inventions would continue to touch lives in ways few recognized. To understand Beulah Louise Henry, you have to understand how her mind worked. Invention, for her, wasn't an occupation. It was an impulse, something that moved through her constantly, like breathing or heartbeat. She saw invention not as discovery, but as empathy. Where others saw inconvenience, she saw opportunity. A stuck zipper, a tangled thread, a child's toy that broke too easily. Each one whispered to her, "Fix me." In her small New York studio, Henry worked surrounded by stacks of notebooks and scraps of material, ribbons, bits of wire, fabric, tin, and rubber. Her notebooks were unlike blueprints. They were more like diaries, bursts of inspiration, written in looping cursive, surrounded by doodles and arrows, notes on function and form. She had hundreds of them. Every page revealed a mind constantly turning, questioning, imagining. Sometimes Beulah worked on 10 or 12 ideas at once. An umbrella handle in one notebook, a sewing attachment in another, a new toy mechanism in a third. When one idea stalled, she would shift to another, letting her thoughts move freely, a symphony of ideas playing in her head. Her assistants said it was like watching lightning in slow motion. She'd be silent for hours, eyes fixed on a page, then suddenly leap up with an idea. For Henry, imagination was not abstract. It was physical. She saw ideas as shapes, movements, and rhythms, as if she could feel the way a machine should move before it existed. Beulah found inspiration everywhere. She watched people, their habits, their struggles, their small frustrations. She carried a notebook everywhere she went, jotting down thoughts on park benches, streetcars, even restaurants. A leaky fountain pen inspired her to design a new ink cartridge system. A ripped handbag became the idea for a new clasp mechanism. She had an inventor's eye, the ability to notice what others ignored. Henry had no formal training in engineering. Her education was in art, sketching, color, form. And yet, that background gave her a different kind of vision. she approached invention as both art and science, concerned not only with function, but with beauty, proportion, and elegance. Her machines were often praised for their aesthetic simplicity. To her, the two were inseparable. A beautiful mechanism was an efficient one. Beulah's creative mind thrived on collaboration. She employed mechanics and model makers to build prototypes from her sketches. She treated them, though, not as subordinates, but as partners. Her trust in others allowed her imagination to become tangible. It was teamwork, rare and deeply human. By the mid-1930s, Beulah's name had become synonymous with invention. But beyond the patents and headlines, her legacy was something deeper, the embodiment of a creative life. She lived not for fame, not even for profit, but for the joy of bringing an idea into existence. For her, imagination was a duty she fulfilled, and the world was infinitely better for it. Even as the tumultuous 1940s and 50s approached, her prolific output would not slow. Her mind was a whirlwind of invention, an endless current of ideas. But invention is not only creation, it is also business, ambition, and survival. Her decades-long career had set the stage for her final, most complex innovations, and her enduring place in history. Beulah's name was soon known to manufacturers across the country. Her patents were studied by engineers, and her inventions, from sewing machine attachments to children's toys, were sold in stores coast to coast. Unlike many inventors of her time, Beulah didn't build factories or hire distributors. Instead, she pioneered a model that would later become common in the tech world, licensing. This, of course, gave her freedom, the ability to focus entirely on invention. It also gave her leverage. She could negotiate contracts, choose partners, and protect her intellectual property. Her contemporaries often underestimated how strategic she was. To them, she was a novelty, a woman with clever ideas. But behind that genteel Southern voice was a brilliant negotiator who understood the value of her mind. To Beulah, invention was not ownership, it was contribution. When the Second World War began, America's industries transformed overnight. Factories retooled for military production. Inventors were recruited to improve everything from machinery to materials. Beulah Louise Henry continued to work through it all. She filed new patents, collaborated with manufacturers, and adapted her designs to new materials like plastics. Lighter, stronger, and cheaper than metal. She was fascinated by synthetic polymers. They opened a world of possibilities. Toys that wouldn't break. Containers that could be sterilized. New fabrics that repelled moisture. And once again, her timing was perfect. As the war ended and consumer goods returned to shelves, America entered an age of convenience. And Beulah was already designing for it. Later work included improvements for the camera and even an electric freezer bag. By the 1950s, Beulah Louise Henry had become something rare, a woman who had built a lifelong career on ideas alone. She never married, never relied on a husband, business partner, or investor. Her inventions and the royalties they earned gave her complete independence. That independence was radical. At a time when women were expected to manage households, she managed contracts. When others saved for security, she spent on creativity. And she did it all with quiet confidence. Her life was not loud, not scandalous, not tragic, but quietly revolutionary. She didn't march or protest. She simply worked. And in doing so, she changed what women could do and imagine for themselves. For over 50 years, Beulah Louise Henry held nearly 50 patents and created more than 100 inventions. Her influence was subtle but profound. As the 1950s gave way to the 1960s, her prolific career would finally draw to a close. But the story of her impact and her ultimate legacy had only just begun. Henry, once Lady Edison, found herself living in a world that was moving too fast, even for her. Corporations now dominated the patent landscape, and the figure of an independent inventor, especially a woman, became a relic of a simpler time. In her later years, Beulah lived quietly in New York. She continued to sketch ideas and file occasional patents, but her pace slowed. The bustling workshop that once echoed with clanging tools and conversation grew still. She had earned enough, though, through her licensing deals, to live comfortably. But wealth was never her goal. What she missed wasn't money, it was momentum. Though she was never bitter, she was not oblivious. In the mid-1960s, few newspapers wrote about her, and textbooks on American innovation mentioned Edison, Ford, and Bell, but not Henry. For a woman once celebrated, the silence was deafening. It's the familiar pattern. The world celebrates pioneers when they fit the narrative, then quietly moves on when the novelty fades. Yet, her defiance was constant. She filed her last recorded patents in the 1960s. One of her final inventions was a durable, water-resistant canvas bag for household goods, showcasing her lifelong commitment to improving simple, everyday objects. In 1962, when a young woman, reporter, she was an artist who sketched mechanics, a Southern gentlewoman who commanded boardrooms, and a visionary who proved that ingenuity and grace could coexist. She lived not for fame, but for the joy of bringing an idea into existence. And even if the world forgot her name for a time, her influence endured. History can be cruel to its innovators, especially to those who defy its expectations. But time has a way of rediscovering those it once overlooked. It's a quiet afternoon in the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History. Visitors walk past displays of Edison's phonograph, Bell's telephone, Ford's engineer. And in one small glass case, almost easy to miss, sits a doll with soft curls, a delicate dress, and eyes that blink when tilted. A plaque beneath it reads, "Invented by Beulah Louise Henry, 1920s." It's just one of her many inventions, a tiny artifact of imagination. But to those who know her story, it represents far more. It's a reminder that behind every innovation, there are countless minds whose work history almost forgot. And one of those minds belonged to Lady Edison. In the years after her death, Beulah Louise Henry's legacy slept quietly in archives. Her patents filed away, her name rarely mentioned. But as women's history began to find its footing in the 80s and 90s, scholars and historians started digging deeper. They found her name again in old newspaper clippings, patent records, and business contracts. What they uncovered astonished them. Dozens of patents, hundreds of designs, a lifetime of invention stretching across 6 decades. They realized that Beulah Henry had not only been prolific, she had been pioneering. She was among the first women to build an independent career from intellectual property alone. She had anticipated modern licensing models, corporate partnerships, and even the very idea of the creative entrepreneur. And she did it all at a time when women often lacked basic financial independence. In 2006, Beulah Louise Henry was inducted posthumously into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. For the first time in decades, her name was spoken alongside Edison, Bell, and Ford, not as an imitation, but as an equal. Her story has since been taught in classrooms, shared in documentaries, and cited by inventors who see her in something familiar. the restless curiosity that drives creation itself. Beulah Louise Henry never called herself a feminist, but her life was one long act of defiance. She didn't break barriers with protest. She dismantled them with productivity. Each patent she filed was a declaration that imagination has no gender. Each invention a step forward for those who would follow. Today, her legacy lives on not only in the tools and toys that carry her fingerprints, but in every woman who looks at a problem and thinks, I can fix that. She taught us that innovation is not only about spectacle, it's about service, not about ego, but empathy. And in that sense, Henry's greatest invention was herself. From a small town of Raleigh to the business streets of New York, from the hum of workshops to the halls of history, Beulah Louise Henry dreamed, designed, and delivered. Next time on Historical Insights, we travel back 5 centuries to a world of art and anatomy, invention and intrigue, to meet a man whose mind saw patterns in everything. A painter, a scientist, an engineer, a dreamer far ahead of his time. This is the story of Leonardo da Vinci, the man who sketched the future and in doing so revealed the endless possibilities of the human mind. Thank you for listening to Historical Insights. Again, I'm Tony Ray. If you enjoyed this episode, follow and share the show. And join me next time as we continue exploring the people who changed history not by chance, but by choice. Because every great story begins with someone who dared to imagine.